Hello, everybody. Hello. And welcome to this weekend of goddess discussion, and possibly goddess worship. I want to say I'm going to do a really short introduction to the weekend, just so that we can, because Faye will be talking about Ceres twice. Lynn will be talking about Vesta and Juno, and I'll do a little thing about Pallas tomorrow.
You could do more than a little thing.
Okay, I'll do a vast and unthinkable thing about Pallas tomorrow. So it might end up being a bit bitty, but we would like to try and synthesize this stuff at the end of each day and have a sort of discussion, I hope. And I wanted to do a little bit of an overarching thing about the asteroids, etc., so that we don't end up repeating ourselves with some of the more obvious things. First of all, we're only doing these for Juno, Ceres, Vesta, and Pallas. Yet there are many more asteroids, and we've chosen to do those ones. Obviously, Ceres is by far the largest. Vesta and Pallas are the next largest, and then Juno is really small, which is kind of strange, but she is the one who turns up on your astrology software, and Lynn has a lot to say about her because she's very interesting, and she's the queen of Mount Olympus, the wife of Zeus, so she's therefore obviously very important. The fourth biggest asteroid is actually Hygieia, so I've printed out a little piece I wrote about her, even though we won't be addressing her in this today. First of all, I want to correct myself as well and say that we're doing 3 asteroids and 1 dwarf planet, which is Ceres, of course. So the only reason I've been saying asteroids is just sort of shorthand. So on your little sheet, you've got a nice map of where the asteroid belt is, which is quite an important thing, both astronomically and astrologically. I'm going to talk a bit about the science, and then I'm going to talk about religion. I'm going to talk about those two things, because science and religion are kind of where astrology, the intersection of those two is astrology in a way. Are you guys ready? Sorry, you're distracting me from my train of thought. The asteroid belt is between Mars and Jupiter. It's quite a wide, it's like a rubble belt. And it's important to remember that it's between Mars and Jupiter, because what does that mean? It means that it's between the inner planets, which are our personal planets, and those outer planets, right? And also that it's kind of working as one belt, possibly, around the inner planets. It's containing us or something. Anyway, they're working possibly together. And the orbits of these, of the asteroids are fairly similar in length. Yeah, so that's written on your sheet as well. It's about 4 years, and some of them shorter and some of them longer, but it's about 4.5 years. And so that's interesting as well. And each one of these asteroids also will have a retrograde period within those 4 years. And that's quite important, just to keep in mind. So that's the science bit. And then I just wanted to say a few things about the goddess, or the goddesses, and how that relates to astrology. Because, of course, you all know that there's kind of a dearth of female archetypes within traditional astrology. We have the moon and Venus, and Mother Earth herself, but that's far outweighed by the male archetypes, which is why it's so important to start thinking about what's in the asteroid belt, and why it's so useful to have these other kinds of archetypes. The 2 main ones that we traditionally have are the moon, which is all kind of mother, etc., and the lover, which is Venus. Of course, we know Moon and Venus are much more complex than that, but just to put those very starkly, those are the 2 archetypes that we've had to work with, female archetypes, and suddenly when we start to use the asteroids, we get a whole gamut, a whole range of archetypes to play with, yeah? And different ways of being a woman. And different ways for men to find the woman inside them. Because we all know, and this is a really important point that I want to make about gender, which is that, you know, that we don't want to get too binary about these things. In other cultures, for example, you know, we're used to thinking of the moon as female and the sun as male, but in plenty of other cultures, it's the other way around, right? So we don't want to get stuck too much on these binary notions of male, female, etc. There's a fluid stuff going on in the middle, and we all have these archetypes inside us. Which brings me to the idea of the goddess, as opposed to the goddesses. I'm sure that probably you guys have probably read Joseph Campbell and maybe Robert Graves, about the idea that it was a matriarchal culture and there was goddess worship, and that was what came before. There's this little fat lady is from being excavated from Çatalhöyük, I think, which is the oldest human settlement in Turkey. And there were plenty of these found there. So there are some arguments that we had goddess worship before and this was cast aside. And there are lots of really interesting theories about how this happened, how Aryan tribes came down to India and Europe, pushed out the goddess or married the goddess and brought their own culture, and how we end up with a sort of synthesis. But the goddess is always underneath that. So we get to astrology with our Greco-Roman astrologies, which is what most of us, the roots of what we have. And we end up with our familiar Olympian goddesses. These are what these asteroids are named after, and they represent various different kinds of energy or life force or archetype. But it's useful, I think, to think of them also as one. Yes, so there are different faces of one. And that's why there are different faces of one, and they're represented inside you personally, that you have all of these goddesses within you. And what you do when you're reading a chart is you're synthesizing all those ones. And actually, if you think about a chart reading, you're synthesizing the gods and the goddesses. You're synthesizing all that energy and getting it to make a story, to understand a story. And that story is the story that's coming out of you. So you're living the goddess, you're living the gods through your life and through living your chart. And what astrology is for, and this, people can argue with this, but one of the things that astrology is to help us align with those energies so that we can live a happier and more fulfilling life. And through the knowledge of what those energies are, then we can align more easily. So, I suppose what I'm saying in sum is, although we're talking about the many different faces of the goddess, we're also synthesizing towards the one goddess and even the one divinity in your chart, because your chart it's transparent, yeah? So you see through the goddess, you see through the gods, there's a transparency to it so that you see through to the one.